Picture this. March 15th, 44 BCE. The most powerful man in the world lies dead on the Senate floor, stabbed 23 times by his own colleagues. The conspirators believe they've saved the Roman Republic. They expect gratitude, celebration, restoration of liberty. Instead, they've unleashed a catastrophe that will hunt them down one by one. Within 3 years, nearly every assassin will meet a violent end. What happened to the men who killed Julius Caesar? The answer is a tale of revenge, civil war, and the death of an empire. Rome, March 44th BCE. The republic that had stood for nearly 5 centuries was crumbling under its own weight. Julius Caesar had crossed the Rubicon 4 years earlier, defeated his rivals in a brutal civil war, and emerged as dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. This title terrified the traditionalists of Rome's Senate. For them, Caesar represented everything their ancestors had fought against: monarchy, tyranny, the concentration of absolute power in a single man's hands. The conspiracy formed in whispers throughout early 44 BCE. At its core were approximately 60 senators, but the leadership fell to a handful of key figures. Marcus Junius Brutus, Caesar's protege and rumored illegitimate son, became the conspiracy's philosophical heart. His ancestor had expelled Rome's last king 5 centuries prior, and he felt the weight of that legacy. Gaius Cassius Longinus, a skilled military commander who harbored personal resentment toward Caesar, provided the tactical ruthlessness. Decimus Brutus Albinus, one of Caesar's trusted generals, offered crucial access that made the assassination possible. These men genuinely believed they were liberators. They called themselves the Liberatores. They thought that by removing Caesar, they would restore the Senate's authority, the people's freedom, and the Republic's ancient constitution. They were catastrophically wrong about the Rome they lived in. The Republic they idealized had already died, killed by a century of civil wars, wealth inequality, and institutional decay. Caesar wasn't the disease, he was a symptom. By killing him without a plan for what came next, the conspirators guaranteed not liberty, but more bloodshed. On the Ides of March they struck. Caesar fell beneath a statue of his former rival Pompey, bleeding from 23 stab wounds. The assassins expected the Roman people to erupt in celebration. Instead, they were met with shocked silence, then growing rage. The immediate aftermath of the assassination revealed the conspirators' fatal miscalculation. They had planned the murder meticulously, but given almost no thought to what followed. Within hours, Rome descended into chaos. The common citizens, many of whom had benefited from Caesar's populist reforms and land distributions, viewed the assassins not as liberators, but as elitist murderers. The conspirators barricaded themselves on the Capitoline Hill, suddenly realizing they controlled nothing but the blood-stained Senate floor. Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony, Caesar's co-consul and loyal supporter, seized the political initiative with masterful cunning. Rather than immediately attacking the conspirators, he negotiated. In exchange for amnesty for the assassins, Antony gained custody of Caesar's will, his personal papers, and most crucially, the right to deliver the funeral oration. This seemed like a reasonable compromise to the confused Senate. It was anything but. At Caesar's funeral on March 20th, approximately 4 days after the assassination, Antony delivered one of history's most consequential speeches. Standing before Caesar's corpse, he displayed the dictator's bloodied toga, pointing out each knife wound. He read Caesar's will, which left generous gifts to Rome's citizens and bequeathed his private gardens to public use. The crowd transformed from mourners to an enraged mob. Rioters hunted anyone suspected of involvement in the conspiracy. One poet named Helvius Cinna was literally torn apart by the mob simply because he shared a name with one of the conspirators, Cornelius Cinna. The Liberatores fled Rome. They scattered to various provinces, attempting to raise legions and secure territory. But they faced an opponent they hadn't anticipated, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's 18-year-old great-nephew and adopted heir. History would know him as Augustus, Rome's first emperor. But in 44 BCE, he was an untested teenager whom Antony initially dismissed as a boy who owes everything to a name. That dismissal was Antony's mistake. Octavian proved ruthlessly competent, strategically patient, and utterly committed to avenging his adopted father. He formed an uneasy alliance with Antony and Marcus Lepidus, creating the Second Triumvirate in November 43 BCE. Unlike Caesar's informal alliance with Pompey and Crassus decades earlier, this triumvirate was official, legal, and equipped with extraordinary powers. Its first act was to publish prescription lists, death warrants for their political enemies. Approximately 300 senators and 2,000 equestrians were marked for execution. Their property would be confiscated, their heads mounted in the forum as warnings. The hunt for Caesar's assassins had become systematic, state-sponsored vengeance. The Liberatores attempted to consolidate power in Rome's eastern provinces. Brutus seized control of Macedonia, Crete, and parts of Greece, while Cassius took command of Syria and raised 11 legions. By mid-42 BCE, they commanded approximately 80,000 infantry and 17,000 cavalry. On paper, their force rivaled the triumvirate's army. They established their base at Philippi in Macedonia, a strategic location controlling the Via Egnatia, the main road connecting Rome's eastern territories. But structural weaknesses plagued their cause from the beginning. The Liberatores struggled with legitimacy. They had murdered the Republic's legal dictator without formal authority. Their propaganda emphasized liberty and constitutional restoration, but many saw them as murderers fleeing justice. Their army consisted partly of veterans loyal to Caesar's memory, now fighting against Caesar's avengers. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Furthermore, funding their massive military operation required brutal taxation of the eastern provinces, undermining their claims to be liberators. Octavian and Antony crossed the Adriatic Sea in September 42nd BCE with a combined force of approximately 100,000 infantry and 13,000 cavalry. The Liberatores held the superior defensive position at Philippi, occupying high ground with secure supply lines to the sea. Military logic favored waiting, forcing the triumvirs to attack uphill or exhaust their supplies. Cassius, the experienced general, advocated for this patient strategy. But political pressure and Brutus's impatience overruled tactical wisdom. The Liberatores couldn't afford to appear weak or hesitant. On October 3rd, 42 BCE, the First Battle of Philippi began. The initial engagement was chaotic and contradictory. Brutus's forces on the right flank executed a devastating assault against Octavian's position. Octavian, ill with disease, had left his tent just before Brutus's soldiers overran the camp. His troops broke and fled. Brutus's men captured the triumvir camp, slaughtering servants and stragglers. On Brutus's wing, the day appeared won. His soldiers celebrated, believing victory complete. But on the opposite flank, disaster unfolded for the Liberatores. Antony, demonstrating the aggressive military genius that had made him Caesar's most effective commander, launched a surprise flanking maneuver through marshland thought impassable. His forces struck Cassius's legions from an unexpected angle, creating confusion and panic. Cassius's troops broke. Antony's soldiers seized the Liberatores' main camp, capturing supplies and standards. From his position on high ground, Cassius watched dust clouds and distant fighting. Unable to see clearly what had happened on Brutus's wing, and receiving reports that his own camp had fallen, Cassius made a fatal assumption: total defeat. Roman commanders carried a certain honor code. Defeat in such circumstances demanded death rather than capture. Cassius ordered his freedman Pindorus to kill him. Pindorus obeyed, driving a sword into his commander's neck. The supreme irony emerged within hours. Brutus had won his engagement decisively. The battle was actually inconclusive, with both sides suffering roughly equal casualties of approximately 9,000 men each. Had Cassius waited for accurate intelligence, the war might have continued. Instead, the Liberatores lost their most experienced military mind to premature despair. Brutus now commanded alone. For 3 weeks, the armies faced each other in tense stalemate. Brutus's strategic position remained strong. His supply lines were secure, his troops held superior ground, time favored his position. Every day, the triumvirs remained in Macedonia. Their supplies dwindled and discontent in Italy grew. All military logic screamed for patience. But Brutus faced a problem beyond tactics, morale, and politics. His troops, especially the legions recruited in the east, grew restless. They hadn't been paid fully. They questioned why they fought for men who'd assassinated Rome's greatest general. Desertions increased daily. Brutus's officers pressured him for decisive action. The psychological weight of Cassius's death, the burden of sole command, and the political impossibility of appearing weak overcame strategic wisdom. On October 23rd, 42 BCE, Brutus ordered a general engagement. This time, the result wasn't ambiguous. Antony's experienced legions, fighting with the fury of avenging Caesar, systematically destroyed the Liberatores' army. The battle dissolved into a slaughter. Approximately 20,000 of Brutus's soldiers died in the fighting or the pursuit that followed. Entire legions ceased to exist. Survivors scattered into the Macedonian countryside, hunted by triumvirate cavalry. Brutus fled the battlefield with a small group of companions. That night in the hills outside Philippi, he reportedly spoke his last words. "By all means must we fly, not with our feet, however, but with our hands." The meaning was clear. Flight meant death by their own hands, not running. Some accounts say he quoted a line from Greek tragedy. "Unhappy virtue, you were only a name, and yet I worshipped you as real. But now it seems you were only a slave to fortune." Marcus Junius Brutus, the philosophical heart of the conspiracy, the man who believed he was saving the Republic, drove his sword into his own chest. His companions helped guide the blade home. He died believing his cause was righteous and his failure was fate's cruelty. He couldn't have known that within decades, poets and historians would debate whether he was Rome's last defender of liberty or its most self-deluded murderer. Antony reportedly wept when he found Brutus's body. He ordered his corpse treated with honor, wrapped in Antony's own expensive purple cloak. Even in death, even as enemies, the Roman aristocratic code demanded respect. Antony sent Brutus's ashes to his mother, Servilia, who had been Caesar's mistress. The layers of tragedy and irony were complete. The Battle of Philippi destroyed the conspiracy's leadership, but the vengeance was far from complete. The surviving Liberatores met systematically grim fates over the following years. Of the approximately 60 conspirators, virtually none died peacefully in their beds. Decimus Brutus Albinus, Caesar's trusted general who had betrayed him most intimately by ensuring he attended the Senate that fatal day, fled to Gaul after the assassination. He attempted to raise legions but found his reputation poisoned by the crime. Antony's forces pursued him relentlessly. Abandoned by his troops and hunted through the Alps, Decimus was captured in September 43rd BCE. He was executed on Antony's orders. Some sources say his head was sent to Rome and placed at the base of Caesar's statue. Gaius Trebonius, who had distracted Mark Antony outside the Senate while the assassination occurred, fled to Asia Minor. He declared himself proconsul but held power for only months. Publius Cornelius Dolabella, a Caesar supporter, captured him in Smyrna in 43 BCE. Trebonius was tortured and beheaded. His head was used as a ball, kicked through the streets before being impaled on a spear. Tullius Cimber, who had given the signal for the attack by grabbing Caesar's toga, died at Philippi. Gaius Casca, who struck the first blow, a glancing wound to Caesar's shoulder, also fell at Philippi. Publius Casca, his brother who struck subsequent blows, committed suicide after the battle. The pattern repeated again and again: battle death, suicide, execution, assassination. Some conspirators lasted longer by fleeing farther. Quintus Ligarius escaped to Africa but died there within 2 years, likely from illness, though some sources suggest poison. A handful of minor conspirators survived by complete obscurity, abandoning public life entirely and living in remote exile. But the famous names, the proud senators who'd believed they'd be hailed as heroes, nearly all were dead within 3 years of Caesar's murder. The casualty count at Philippi exceeded 40,000 men dead across both battles. The republic they died for no longer existed except as propaganda. The second triumvirate divided Rome's territories like a conquered prize. Within 13 years, Octavian would defeat Antony and Cleopatra, becoming Augustus, Rome's first emperor in all but name. The Roman Empire would endure for centuries. The Roman Republic was extinct. The bitter irony defines the entire episode. The Liberatores murdered Caesar to prevent monarchy and instead guaranteed it. Had Caesar lived, he might have restored some republican forms, or his dictatorship might have ended with his natural death, allowing institutional evolution. We'll never know. What we do know is that by killing him violently and without a succession plan, the conspirators created a power vacuum that could only be filled by civil war and, ultimately, by an emperor more absolute than Caesar ever was. History's judgment has been harsh but divided. Dante placed Brutus and Cassius in the lowest circle of hell, alongside Judas Iscariot, as history's greatest traitors. Shakespeare immortalized Brutus as a tragic hero, the noblest Roman of them all, motivated by principle rather than malice. Modern historians debate whether they were deluded idealists, self-interested oligarchs, or simply men unable to comprehend that history had moved beyond their ancient values. The reconstruction of the Liberatores' fates draws from multiple ancient sources, each with their own biases. Plutarch's lives, particularly his biographies of Brutus, Caesar, and Antony, provide detailed accounts written approximately 150 years after the events. His work emphasizes character and moral lessons, occasionally prioritizing dramatic narrative over strict accuracy, but remains our most complete source for the personal dimensions of this story. Appian's Civil Wars offers extensive military detail about Philippi and the proscriptions, written in the 2nd century CE from an Alexandrian perspective. His casualty figures and tactical descriptions align with other sources, lending credibility to his account. Suetonius's The 12 Caesars provides contemporary gossip and detail about the assassination itself, though his focus on scandal sometimes undermines factual reliability. Modern scholarship, particularly Ronald Syme's The Roman Revolution and Adrian Goldsworthy's Augustus, First Emperor of Rome, contextualizes these ancient accounts within the broader structural collapse of republican institutions. These works emphasize that the conspirators weren't simply wrong about tactics, they fundamentally misunderstood the Rome they inhabited. The story of Caesar's assassins resonates across millennia because it asks timeless questions. When does tyranny justify violence? Can murder ever serve justice? What happens when noble intentions collide with historical forces beyond individual control? The Liberatores believed they were heroes. History rendered them victims of their own miscalculation, men who struck down a dictator only to discover they'd killed the last barrier, holding back something worse. If you found this exploration of ancient Rome's most consequential murder fascinating, consider what happened next in the power struggle between Octavian and Antony, a clash that ended with Cleopatra, Egypt's fall, and the final transformation of Rome from republic to empire. The consequences of March 15, 44 BCE rippled for decades. The blood spilled at Philippi was only the beginning. Subscribe to explore more moments where individual choices reshape civilization, where battles determined the course of nations, and where history's verdict proved far different from what the participants expected.